Are you making as much progress towards your long-term goals as you would like? If you're not, this video is right for you. This video is an excerpt from my course, Big Picture Productivity. I just created version 3 of the course from scratch and released it, and people are loving it. I'm very proud of it, and it's glad to see that people are liking it so much. So this is one of the course lessons. In this lesson, I show how to take the key action steps for your long-term goals, which we'll have identified somewhere earlier on in the course, and how to organize those in your task manager, and how to organize those in a way that you're really focused and that you're prioritizing the right ones, okay? So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, you're going to love the course, which is over at bigpictureproductivity.com, okay? For now, enjoy this video. So at this point, you should have chosen a task manager, or perhaps you were already using a task manager. So the next step is to start putting things into your task manager, is to start putting your action steps in there. Now, we're going to do this in several parts. First, we're going to put the key action steps, the ones that you've identified that are going to help you make progress towards your goals, right? And the ones that you've said you're going to work on for the remainder of this quarter or for next quarter, we're going to put those in your task manager first, because those are the most important ones, okay? So let's start there. I'm currently inside my Things 3. This is the task manager that I use these days, and I think it's the best task manager for most people, although there are definitely other good options out there, such as OmniFocus, for example. I'm going to show you how to do this in Things 3, how to transfer your key action steps for either the remainder of this quarter or the next quarter. I'm just going to say the upcoming quarter. It's getting tedious to say the other phrase. How to do that in Things 3. However, if you're using a different task manager, you're going to have to translate these instructions to your task manager. If you need help with that, let me know. I'll be very happy to help you out with that. So the first thing you got to do is you got to organize your task manager by those areas of your life or the roles that you play that we talked about a couple of modules ago. Okay, so I'll show you how I've done that. So in Things, you can go to New List at the bottom and click New Area. And what is an area? It's to group projects and to-dos based on different responsibilities, such as family or work, okay? And so maybe you love to go sailing, and so maybe sailing is a big thing in your life, and that's one of your areas. So you can just create an area called Sailing, and I'll just kind of drag that in here. QRS, yes, that's where it goes. So you're going to do that, and you see that I've already got a bunch of areas set up. I've got my admin and finances, I've got my course development area, fun, health, home, learning, marketing and sales, my podcast, relationships, Toastmasters, trips, and wishes and templates, which maybe we'll talk about later. Maybe we won't. Let's see. So I don't want to go into all of them because I got some private stuff in here. But you get what I'm saying? So you're going to create one area in your task manager for each of those areas in your life or roles that you play that we identified earlier. If you're using OmniFocus, for example, you're not going to have areas. You're going to make these your folders, okay? So inside Sailing, what do I want to do? What I want to do is those key action steps, the list that we made, right? We're going to just simply transfer the ones for the upcoming quarter to your task manager. Now, your key action steps, they could be of a couple of varieties. They could be events. So first of all, if they're events like, oh, I'm going to go lift weights at the gym at 7 in the morning on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, that does not need to go in your task manager because that's an event. So that's something to put in your calendar, and we're going to talk about that later. But things that are tasks, so whether they're individual tasks, whether they're projects, habits to build, repeating tasks, whatever, all of that stuff goes in your task manager. Now, most of the time, your key action steps are going to be projects. So let's do an example. Maybe one of your key projects you've identified for the coming quarter is to get the sailboat, let's say you own a sailboat, inspected before renovations. Right? You want to renovate your sailboat. Is that even the right word for a sailboat? I don't know. But let's say you want to have a professional look over it and tell you, you know what, before you do a big sailing trip with this, you got to have these things fixed, okay? So maybe the action steps for that, and I want you to fill out the action steps at this point, by the way. So I should kind of explain this. So if your key action step that you identified as part of your quarterly planning for the coming quarter, if that's a one-off task, something that you're going to do in one sitting, then you're not going to make it a project, right? Then you're maybe just going to say, call Bob to schedule schedule a time for him to come check out the sailing boat. Boom, that's it. Easy, done, right? Just one task, you're gonna do it one time, then it's done. However, often the key action steps that are really gonna move you forward are projects or habits to build, okay? So, and projects have multiple steps. So in this case, maybe you'll have multiple steps. So you may say, identify a couple of sailing, what are those even called? Shops in my town? I don't know. Get some quotations for the inspection, set up an inspection with one of the shops, clear all my stuff out of the boat, etc. So I want you to actually list the individual steps that are necessary for these key projects that you've identified for the coming quarter. Okay, so it may look like this. Sometimes there'll be dates associated with this. You know, let's say you set up the inspection for, I don't know, June 30th, and what you want to do on this task, hey, this has got to happen by June 30th, so you can go ahead and set a deadline. I don't want to get too deep into task management because I offer separate task management courses, and I don't want to get bogged down in that, but this is the time to do those kinds of things, okay? So maybe you have multiple projects, and you can just go ahead and add another project, and it'll show up in, you know, the right area. Make sure you add your projects to the right area. Okay, so let me show you how I did this. So I'm going to go to a view in things called All Projects, and here's what I want you to do. You have, for the next 3 months, all of these key action steps. Let's say they're projects. Most of them will be identified, right? You cannot work on all of them at once. Even within the 3-month time period, you're going to work on them, you know, in some order, right? Maybe you'll have a couple of active projects at a time, but you're certainly, if you have like 8 action steps or 8 projects, you're not going to work on all of those at the same time, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to denote that in some way. And so Things has a very nice feature called the someday feature, which is just saying, I'm going to work on this someday. It's a really handy feature. And the way I recommend you use it is as follows. Are you planning to work on this key action step in the next 2 weeks? If you are not planning to work on it in the next 2 weeks, assign it to someday. I'll show you that I did that. So if we go under course development, for example, you'll see that I'm currently creating BPP version 3. That's what's currently happening. However, remember from one of the previous videos that some of my other projects for this quarter include creating a course for this website called Fizzle, and perhaps updating my OmniFocus course to version 4. Those are projects that I'll be working on later this quarter, but I'm not going to be working on them in the next 2 weeks because I'm still working on this course. Therefore, I have assigned them to someday. Now, what does that do? If I can just take any task or project, I can just right-click and go when, and I can click someday. And if I do that, it moves into the someday bucket. And it disappears from my sidebar, and also disappears from the anytime view, which I don't really want to get into too much. But it's a way of denoting, hey, I'm not actively working on this. If you're using OmniFocus, for example, the equivalent would be to put your project on hold. It's just a way of telling yourself, even within this quarter, I want to make sure that I'm really focused. So in this case, I wanted to make sure I'm really focused on Big Picture Productivity version 3, and I don't want to be thinking about these other 2 courses. So I want you to take all your action steps. And by the way, don't worry about taking notes on this or whatever. I mean, you can take notes, but the workbook exercise will spell this out for you, okay? So don't worry about it. I'm just demonstrating it now, but you don't need to remember everything in one go. The workbook exercise, you know, I got you. Anyway, the point is, even within the quarter, I want you to be really focused and say, this is what has my attention now. This is for later this quarter, okay? So you're doing one thing at a time, or maybe you have a couple of active projects at a time, but not too many. So back to the All Projects screen. So what do I have here? You'll see that I'm currently buying my own scuba gear. That's something that I wasn't intending to do that this quarter, but then we ended up scheduling a scuba trip, so now I'm doing it. Sometimes you'll find that as the quarter goes on, you'll find that something that you didn't expect that you'll be doing it. And so then you do want to make sure that it becomes an active project, of course. But you also got to ask yourself, how am I going to make time for this? What's the other thing that I then won't do, right? So in this case, since we're going on a trip, you know, buying my own scuba gear, that's going to take a little bit of time. But the trip itself obviously is going to take even more time. I may have to postpone an updated version of my OmniFocus course for the quarter after this. Okay, so my health area, that's my weekly review. We're going to talk about that later. Learning. So this is another one of the key projects that I had set for this quarter, to set up 2 weeks of live Turkish tutoring. That's one of my key action steps to contribute to my goal of learning how to speak conversational Turkish. However, I will not be doing that in the next 2 weeks. So I've set it up as someday. You can see that by the sort of dotted, it's not really dotted, dashed line. And so it's not showing in my sidebar. It's not showing as available for me to work on right now. And that's just how I denote, hey, I'm going to do this, but I want to focus on one thing at a time. And I've done this for a bunch of stuff. You see, I've added all my other key steps to things as well in the correct area. For example, marketing projects. I have created general onboarding sequence, but it's set to someday. Same thing with updating my website. Same thing with taking new photos, etc., etc. Now you'll see that I also have some smaller projects in my thing. So for example, I have a project for each podcast episode I record. Those are not really projects that come from my key action steps that I did in my quarterly planning. These are smaller scope projects that I use sort of ad hoc, and we're going to talk about that more a couple lessons from now. Now, if you had some of your key action steps as habits to build, what should you do then? For each habit, I want you to create a project that is called Build the Habit of. So I'm just going to go over here, and I'm going to say New Project, and I'm going to say Create the Habit of, let's say, meditating every day. And then I want you to drag that under the appropriate area. In this case, it would be under the health area. Okay, and I just want you to leave it like this, because we're going to have a separate lesson on what should actually be in here. What are you actually going to do to make this habit happen? I want you to do this for now. And again, if you're planning to start working on this in the next 2 weeks, keep it like this. If you're not planning to work on it in the next 2 weeks, assign it to someday, put it on hold, or whatever the equivalent is in your task manager, okay? Next, what I want you to do is I want you to think about any repeating tasks. So if your key action steps included repeating tasks, I want you to go ahead and add those to your task manager. Now, what might that look like? Maybe you say, you know what? I really want to, what could I do for course development? Maybe review and reply to the course feedback for my OmniFocus and Things courses. Let's say that's something I wanted to do on a weekly basis. Okay, what I would do is I would take this task, and let's say that's one of my key action steps. I'm going to just say repeat, and I'm going to set some kind of repeating schedule. So maybe I'll do it weekly on Wednesdays or something like that. Boom. That's it, okay? Oh yeah, today's Wednesday, so it shows up right here. So that's what I want you to do right now. Again, the workbook exercise is going to walk you through the steps. So make sure you look at that. Transfer those key action steps to your task manager and make that distinction between what are you going to work on in the next 2 weeks and what are you going to work on later this quarter. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to make more progress towards your long-term goals, head over to bigpictureproductivity.com where you can enroll in the full course. Looking forward to seeing you there.